The reason why you cannot invoke relative identity is because you literally distinguish the persons via their relations, via their properties. So
Okay, so today we got the Muslim Apologetic, and wow, I mean, I watched this clip and it's hard to even respond to it because it's just so full of nonsense. The guy tried to speak and press a Christian on relative identity, and I don't know why this guy is talking about it, because it's just like embarrassing to listen to him. And even more embarrassingly, a lot of you Muslims in his comments were trying to hype him up as if he did anything, when he was just completely speaking absolute nonsense. So let's get right into the clip that I'm referring to.
Identity?
No, absolute identity means whatever is true of A must be true of B.
Part he says, absolute identity is whatever is true of A is true of B. False. It's completely false. That's just a one-way implication. And he's not even saying absolute identity is if X and Y are identical, then. He's not even saying that. He's just saying whatever's true of A is true of B. Well, that doesn't exclude B from having properties that A has. It's just saying that B has all the properties that A has. It's not excluding anything, so it's not doing what he wants to do. And it's just, I mean, he starts off by saying that, which is embarrassing, but the actual, what he wants, absolute identity, is the unqualified identity operator saying if X and Y are identical implies X shares all the properties of Y, Y shares all the property of X.
Wait, when it comes to relative identity, you're going to invoke two categories or two Sortals, being Sortal person and the Sortal God. The Sortal person, in the Sortal person, do you count by absolute or relative identity?
Okay, so the second part, he asks, within the sortal, do we count by absolute or relative identity? Like what? Okay, so we've relativized the identity operator, and then you're asking within the sortal, are we using relative identity? We're already using relative identity. Using relative identity excludes using absolute identity because the absolute identity operator is unrestricted, but the relative identity operator is indexed to a sortal. So it's just a mass of confusion. Like, what is this guy even talking about? I think he doesn't understand that relative identity is about the logical structure of the identity operator. I'll put it on the screen so you guys can see. It's literally like changing what the identity operator is doing. It's not like, I mean, it can be, but it's fundamentally not this like intuitive claim about reality. You're just going to go around making like, oh, do you count by absolute identity? Do you count by relative identity? It's something in logic. It's the logical structure of identity that's being altered.
That's relative identity.
So yeah, to answer the question, when it comes to the Sortal person, do you invoke absolute identity or relative identity?
When it comes to the persons, no, it's not absolute identity.
Not absolute identity? Are you sure about that, Stephen?
Wait, you said when you count in a person?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, because if you're gonna say absolute identity, then that means, I mean, the Father is the Son, and then the Son is the Father. And
No,
I don't go to that.
No, that's not what it means, dude. Stephen, that's not what it means. When you count by absolute identity.
How about just use a language?
No, wait.
I'm not a philosophy guy, bro.
Like, yeah, but you want to deal with it.
This is not.
No.
It's not. Look.
No,
this is not.
No.
It's not. Look.
No, deal with it.
I just want you. Hold on.
No,
I understand you.
I
just want you to use words that we understand.
You just said that invoke a relative identity to the Son, the persons, dude. Do you know how stupid you sound? Anyways, track. I'm literally. Relax, easy. Now, when it comes to the persons, the reason why you cannot invoke relative identity is because you literally distinguish the persons via their relations, via their properties. So because they're going to be discernible, because they're going to be they're going to have different hypostatic properties. Therefore, they're going to be discernible. Therefore, they're not going to be each other. So under the sort of persons is going to be 3 because they're discernible. That's classical identity. So
we cannot invoke relative identity with the persons because we distinguish persons by properties. And if there's a property difference that discerns them, then it's classical identity, i.e. absolute identity. This is absolute nonsense. He's saying that you can't, within sortals, basically, he's saying you can only have one object per sortal, is like the entailment of what he's saying. Because obviously there's going to be something that discerns each object in a sortal class. And he's saying if there's property difference, then you're back to classical identity. No, we're operating within sortals. We've already relativized the identity operator. The whole point of relative identity is that it can deal with that. It can discern different kinds of things whilst relativizing the identity operator. That's the entire point. But he's assuming that discernibility of any kind means classical, what he calls classical identity or absolute identity. That's completely false. What's the argument for that?
If that's the view that you hold to, which I hope that's what you hold to, then this means you hold to impure relative identity. But then this is going to be an issue because you're going to be picking and choosing between sortals how to count. One sortal you choose relative, one sortal you choose absolute. Do you understand everything I'm saying or not?
Next, he says, this means you hold to impure relative identity. In one sortal, you are choosing relative identity. In another sortal, you choose absolute identity. Wow. This is, again, completely false. He's treating impure relative identity as if it's mix matching across sortals. That's not what impure relative identity is. Impure relative identity is a thesis about whether the relativized identity operators exist alongside the standard unqualified identity operator, absolute identity. That's what it is. It isn't mix matching across sortals. Again, this makes no sense because he's saying in one sortal you use relative identity, in another, listen to what he's saying, in another sortal you use absolute identity. You can use absolute identity in sortals. If you're using sortals, that means you've already relativized the identity operator. So there's no absolute identity in relative identity. Otherwise, you're excluding a relativized identity operator because it would be unqualified. So he doesn't know what impure relative identity is, and he doesn't even know what standard relative identity is. Rather, again, the claim is that identity, the logical structure of identity is twofold in impure relative identity, which is that there are some identity statements that are simpliciter and there are others that are relativized. But as soon as you start invoking sortals, you've left. Now, this doesn't tell you whether or not you are a pure or an impure relative identity theorist. And from this video, you won't get it from the guy he's talking to because they're just working within sortals. That doesn't tell you whether or not someone is a pure or impure relative identity theorist. And nothing about anything that they said will tell you that here. In order to discern that, the relative identity theorist would need to say whether or not they believe there are any identity statements that are simpliciter, that are identity statements simpliciter, unqualified, not relativized to a sortal.
Yeah, can you then critique that, because that's exactly what I'm holding to.
Yeah. Again, so the first critique still stands, which I haven't answered, which is if you're going to impose relative identity, you must explain that if the father satisfies, because when you say that relative identity, you're saying that the father satisfies that sortal. And if he satisfies that sortal, he must have the properties that are true of that sortal. I'm not saying that everything is true of the father must be true of the essence, but what is true of the essence must be possessed by the father. But you don't hold that the father is triune, therefore it doesn't work.
Now, this is probably the statement I think a lot of people wonder about with relative identity. And he says, I'm not saying everything true of the Father must be true of the essence, but I'm saying everything true of the essence must be true of the Father. False. That's actually not true under relative identity. Relative identity does not require that everything true of one kind must be predicated of the other. Nothing requires that. Even in the case of the Trinity, it's not the case automatically just by using relative identity that everything true of the divine essence needs to be true of the persons. Now, what I'm saying is nothing is forcing that under relative identity, and he's acting as if it is. What is needed in the Trinity doctrine is that there's going to be some set of predicates that are essential for being considered God or for having the divine essence, like the omni properties and maybe some other predicates. But that doesn't mean that every possible predicate of one object in one sort must be applied to an object of the other. He's just, again, does not understand what relative identity is. And so the last part of it is he tries to press him about the being triune part of it. And being triune is not a condition for being God. So when we say what is needed to be God, we say things like the persons need the omni properties, right? But we don't say the persons need to be triune, because needing to be triune is not a condition to be God. It is not necessary in order to identify a person as God, being triune. And so I've seen this guy I've seen him press Bob at Speaker's Corner. I'll make a video on that, I think, soon if you guys want. But maybe it'd be best if this guy just comes out and says he doesn't know what he's talking about when it comes to relative identity. Because this is just, like, everything he said in this video is wrong. And everything he says just in general that I've seen on logic, relative identity, he just doesn't know what he's saying. So I hope that you guys enjoyed the video. I know I took a big pause for a while. I had a lot of stuff going on, but expect more videos this week.